Hi, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of Psychic Perspectives. My name is Carol, my lovely co-host Sarah. We're back at you again today talking about psychic protection, but we're going to do it from this really kind of interesting perspective, because if you think about psychic protection, the question becomes, what are you protecting yourself from, right? And so we want to take a look at that. We're not going to be talking about strategies per se today, but what is it that you're actually protecting yourself from? Because when you're aware of all of these different aspects that can bombard you, that gives you that sense of awareness about what you need to be paying attention to. And I mean, don't you think that knowing what bombards us is a critical part of the protection process?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's kind of like how I always say being aware of your own energy is probably the number one protection. And I believe this is partly why, because I think deep down we all somewhat project things and absorb things. And we talked about this before, being a projector or being an absorber. Some people will have the tendency to be one or the other more than the other, or depending on the situation, you might be projecting something you're unaware of, or you might be fully aware of. But then also the same is true for the absorption of other people's stuff, you know?
Right. Exactly. I think you're right. We've discussed this quite a bit because I loved your concept of projecting and absorbing. And I think we all do it, even if we're projecting fear in the moment, right? Let's say we're very afraid of something, or we've had a lot of trauma in our past. We could be projecting that. And at the same time, others may be absorbing that. So I think we're a very complicated energetic mix as individuals. And so when we get around other people, these things can affect us. We know that energy is constantly commingling and interacting with one another. And so that's why we want to talk about what is it that we're really protecting ourselves from? Because I think there's a misnomer when it comes to psychic protection that we're only protecting ourselves from these negative entities or these negative experiences. And certainly a lot of them are unwanted experiences, but I think we need to kind of look at this broad picture. And so that's why this lesson was actually inspired by spirit. And I think that that's important to share. I had we're going to use the word intrusion, not attack. That was also something that I didn't like the word attack because it wasn't descriptive enough. It was too specific, because we have intrusions on our energy, right? If you and I are blending and I have kind of an adverse experience because of maybe some anger that you're having today, right? That becomes an intrusion potentially on my energy, especially if I'm in an absorbing state of mind. You're projecting angry because you're very angry today over something. I perhaps am in maybe just a little depressed or down mood. I'm not strong sense of self. Suddenly I'm absorbing that anger. That's not malicious. So we can't call that an attack, but it is an intrusion. It is a commingling of the energies. And if that affects us and we don't want that experience, that may be something we want to say, how do I protect myself from that, right? Because I want to honor that you're angry, being your friend. I want to be there and I want to be capable of listening, but I also don't want to absorb that to the point that it impacts me. And then when you and I are done having a friendly conversation, I carry on about my day and suddenly your anger becomes mine. That has become a commingling that has moved into an intrusion. So thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say empaths have probably the hardest time with that.
Absolutely.
Because
100%.
They're constantly absorbing things from other people, and they might be projecting it as well. But I think that's why it's important to understand like how you were feeling before your interactions with that person. I was just fine, before this person came in.
Yeah, that's awareness is key. Yeah.
Right. So, but yeah.
No, and that is true. So this is important for empaths, right? Or even for people that are doing psychic work, because if I want to be psychically connected to something, I am intentionally commingling my energy. If I'm being a medium, I am intentionally commingling my energy with spirit. We are always commingling our energy with collective consciousness, with the location. If we're in a crowd, whatever it is, energy is constantly commingling. So for people who are psychic or empathic or very sensitive, I also think that people that are in emotionally fragile states is something that also needs to be mentioned. If I'm very fearful, right? Because again, there's been so much stress and anxiety going on in people lately. They are absorbing and commingling with a lot of energy that is negatively impacting them. And I think you said you've noticed an uptake as far as people needing assistance. I've needed more assistance because of that. So when we're in an emotionally fragile state, right? Don't think that this kind of protection is just for people who are psychic. I want to kind of get away from that. If you're emotionally fragile, you may be experiencing some of these intrusions, and you may want to go, wow, I didn't realize that that's bombarding and affecting me, right?
Right.
Yeah. So this was again inspired. So I'm sorry, I'm kind of circling around, but if I haven't mentioned that, I was encouraged to get with Sarah for a variety of reasons. All these really amazing signs and symbols were coming in. It was really funny. And so I went, this is just apparently something I have to do. And I sat down one morning and I said, I need to write about this. I'm being given some information from spirit. They generally kind of knock on my head in the middle of the night. And then they say the next morning, when you get up, make sure you sit down. And so I was given these 5 psychic intrusions. They didn't call them intrusions. Again, that was a word that I wanted to find one that was a benign word. But the 5 degrees of intrusions was something that was given to me. And I thought, this is amazing. So I do want to let people know that this isn't just something that I personally came up with. I truly believe that this was inspired from spirit. I was super excited, got a hold of you the next day, and we started talking about it and got
No, it was really good.
We got really excited. So it's finally, I think, time to talk about them. So that has brought us to where we are today. Anything you want to add? Because I've been rambling before I move on.
No, let's just jump right in, because I think we have a lot to cover. So
we do. Yeah. So I do want people to kind of please forgive me, because I am going to read these. And as always, I know when people are watching the videos, I have a little bit of information that I put down at the bottom that kind of spells some of that out, so that if you want to write them down, feel free. All right. So the 5 levels of psychic intrusions, and we're going to talk about the least severe first, moving to the most severe next. Okay.
Right.
So the first level of psychic intrusion is what we call incidental. These are small, barely noticeable intrusions based on normal daily interactions. They're infrequent. They're not intentional. They may be barely discernible. They're typically not verifiable. So in other words, they might happen when you're passing by someone, people you meet momentarily, such as walking by someone at a coffee shop, the person that's checking you out in the grocery store, the fast foods person that you're working with, other shoppers in a store, if you're at a fair. So these are very minor, very small. You may not even really realize that you're passing next to this person, and there's just this very low level incidental shift that happens in your energy. They occur if you're not a sensitive person, you're probably not even going to notice them.
Right. I liken this to, when we are at the grocery store, for example, and maybe it's something that you can't really help. Like we were talking about, before, where you're in a bad mood and maybe you don't know that you're in the projection mode.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to wear my emotions on my face a lot. So
Mm-hmm.
I might not even be aware of it, but I might have, resting bitch face, and that puts someone off because they're like, well, what's her problem? And it's just like, well, I'm just not happy to be here, or whatever it is. But that could be a projection that someone else picks up that they are not really noticing, or vice versa if I absorb that. Another thing I would liken to that is maybe a place that has a lot of residual energy, that you just kind of
Oh, that's a great point.
It just has like a feel about it, and you're like, oh, I don't know. Now all of a sudden I feel a little down and I don't really know why. And it could just be because of the area is like that. It's just the feel of the room or something. Yeah, I think because
that's a good point. I forgot to not to say I forgot, because again, this was inspired from spirit, and I just, whatever I hear is what I write down. But I think you bring up a good point in terms of location and having that particular residual energy. I want to move to accidental though, which is the second one, because incidental and accidental, they were super, super close. And when I read them, I went, okay, what are the, when I received and or read them, they're very, very close. So I want to give you now the second level up of an intrusion, right, which is accidental. Now, these are noticeable intrusions. Remember, in incidental, they said barely noticeable. In accidental, now we're kind of noticing them more. They're still based on these normal daily interactions. They're occasional. They're not intentional. Someone's not doing it on purpose. They're typically not verifiable, again, because it's not like you're in a sitting with someone or we're not having a conversation. And they occur from the same sources as incidental, but now the intrusion level has become discernible. That's really the big difference between incidental and accidental is that now we're aware of it.
Right.
You're right. Wow, I just got really mad for some reason. Is that because I'm mad, or is because that guy over there is really pissed off at his boss and he just walked by and somehow that energy just commingled with me and I just instantly became angry without really knowing why? I can't verify that it's him. I don't know that it's happening.
Right.
It's an accident, right?
Right.
So these occur from the same sources above, but the intrusion level is now discernible. And this is perhaps causing difficulty in being around others, especially in public. And it could be from the collective consciousness as well. So that was the inspired part of that. So I think there's a big difference there between incidental and accidental only in the awareness level. And so people who are sensitive are probably going to fall more into that accidental category. Whereas people like myself, I'm not empathic. So for me, that very rarely happens, but I'm quite certain that the incidental happens all the time. I'm just not paying attention to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So if I'm thinking, or if I'm interpreting this correctly, it's kind of like, it's just, so you're saying accidental is kind of just like the awareness of it happening. So, every day we bring a certain amount of baggage to the table, so to speak. And if all of a sudden I notice that, hey, Carol, you brought a certain amount of baggage today, and I'm feeling that, is that what you're talking? It's not your intention, of course, but it is something that I am picking up on.
But this would be with this would be with a stranger, because remember, it's saying accidental, which means that it coming from normal daily actions that we typically can't verify. So it's coming from these sources that are, because that's going to move us to our next level. So we want to be careful. So it's really coming from those sources that we just kind of casually run into on a day-to-day basis. We walk into a building, like you said, we're picking up our fast food and we get this yucky feeling from the building. It's just kind of an accidental thing. We moved into that space, but we were aware of it. So I think awareness is really just the big difference. And so if you're in a more sensitive state, these may be more common types of intrusions for you. They're very accidental. They're going to come and go a lot, right?
Right.
Because you're coming and going. So that's kind of where I think that, and they're making that a very low level type of experience.
Right. Okay.
Does that kind of help a little bit?
Yeah, I guess.
And I think as we go through them, that will help clarify some as well. I think as we clarify them a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. No, we'll keep going. We'll kind of just, we'll say what they are. And then
you and I have discussed this, but it's been months ago. We were kind of waiting to when we felt it was the right time to present that. So let's go ahead and move to the next highest level, which would be intrusion number 3, and it's called the causal level. Okay, causal. I loved these words. I thought, oh, they're so cool. I wouldn't have come up with them myself. Incidental, accidental, now causal. This intrusion is based on regular interactions with people that we are in close proximity with: coworkers, friends, family, medical staff, hairdressers, your sitters or clients, spirits, right? Because now we've chosen to have an experience with these people. They're not random anymore. So causal is very different. Okay, let me continue to read. These intrusions may be noticeable or unnoticeable, positive or negative, depending on the person we are interacting with. But because we must engage with these people, we typically must allow the intrusion to take place. Therefore, we are willingly allowing this type of intrusion to take place, and they typically can be validated and identified. So I want to encourage people, if they're really interested, to go back and listen to these inspired words again, because Spirit doesn't waste a word. That paragraph is packed with a lot of information about what causal is. So when you gave the example of you and I rubbing off on each other, that's not accidental, that's causal. You and I have a relationship. We agree to be in a relationship. And as a result, your intrusions and my intrusions are going to commingle.
Got you.
Whether they're positive or negative. Now, we can verify them, as this paragraph says, because I can say, wow, you feel really stressed today, or you feel this today, right? You're going to be able to validate that for me. I'm going to know the source of that if I'm paying attention, of course, if I'm paying attention. And I think that that's the key again, because I could be sitting with my hairdresser getting my hair done, and I've agreed to have that relationship with that person. So our energy is naturally going to commingle. Whether that intrusion is positive or negative depends on both me and the hairdresser.
Right.
So the relationship, the energy commingling is agreed upon, but we can still have intrusions. So
boundaries are important.
Absolutely. And that's an important one. But so now you can see how we've moved out of from incidental, which is very low level, not noticeable, accidental, which is noticeable, but random, causal, which is relationship based.
Got you.
It's agreed upon. So there's a cause for it now. It's not an accident. There's a cause, and that cause is the relationship. Right?
Okay.
Make sense?
Yep.
So let's move on then. The next degree up of an intrusion, and remember, again, these can be positive or negative, because that's going to be important here, is intentional. So in the intentional intrusion is number 4. Intrusions that take place against our desires, but are not malicious, right? So I'm not choosing to target that person. It's not malicious. However, because they're driven by a strong intention, they can create effect that may or may not be desired, but they can be positive or negative, and we may or may not notice them. A good example of a positive intentional experience would be energy healing. But in this, we should always get permission so we're not wrongfully invading. Intentional intrusions may arise from needy clients or sitters, those who are jealous or envious, those who are angry with us, bitter, or hold a grudge. Depending on the situation, these may or may not be able to be validated. Okay. So when we look at an intention, it's targeted at us. It's targeted, right? There's a big difference there. Causal is just a byproduct of a relationship. If you're angry, you're not targeting me.
Right.
It's a byproduct of our causal relationship, right? So it's a cause. When it's intentional, if you're angry at me and you're shooting daggers, even if you're just cussing at me in the privacy of your home, you're targeting me.
Right.
Now, it's not malicious. You're not intending to do it. That's the big difference, because that moves us into the most severe form. You're angry at me, but you're not saying, I'm going to send a hex or a spell or a curse, or I want to steal something from that person. You still have an intention, and it's very strong, and it can be negative or positive. Because when you do healing and clearing work, this is exactly what you're doing.
Right. I was going to say it's highly intentional.
It is intentional intrusion, but for positive. People want that intrusion, and you're doing it ethically. You're asking for their permission, right? We don't do that without permission. Same thing when we're reading someone's energy, we're asking permission. So we are intentionally intruding and commingling, but we're doing it for positive reasons. So I see your eyebrows going up and thinking. So what's coming up for questions before I move to the most severe level? Or do we want to move to that one and then we'll talk about it?
Well, I kind of want to move to the next one first, because I feel like there's a discrepancy between intentional and what I think is the next one, which is malicious, right?
All right. Well, and again, please remember, I feel like Spirit brought these forward. And so let's kind of take a look at them, and because I tend to think that they've got it on point, and maybe you and I as human beings need to hammer that out. So the worst one, obviously, when we think of a psychic attack, this is really, I think, what Spirit was trying to convey is we need to be careful. We understand that intrusions happen at a variety of different levels. So yes, there can be a negative intention geared towards someone. I hate that person. She's my arch enemy. I swear to God, I just hate that woman, blah, 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 blah. I've got a really strong emotion. I'm not really projecting it at a person, but because my intention about that person is negative, it can affect someone. That's about where we need to be aware that our own hate and anger can affect someone, even if we're not even aware of it. Now, so the malicious level, and I'm going to read it. Intrusions intentionally meant to cause harm or to take from our person, either mentally, emotionally, physically, or energetically. These are conscious actions of a negative nature that may or may not be noticeable or verifiable without a degree of skill or assistance from others. Typically, the sender tries to mask or hide their identity and intentions, but will most likely be someone you know or has been in contact with you at one time or another. There is a cause and reason behind their intention.
Okay. So
I think Spirit said it beautifully. They're really delineating that the intention is at this high level. It's now turned into what we would consider an attack. It's malicious. It's not just anger, bitterness, and judgment. It is an all on, I want you to pay. And I'm going to,
but furthermore, I'm going to cover my tracks as well, because intentional to me can still be, I want you to pay. But the malicious factor is where they go like above and beyond, and they're like really trying to cover it up that it was them to begin with. I've experienced that on multiple occasions. So, so I think there's a difference between definitely the intentional and the malicious, but not by much, only in the way that, the malicious side is like, it's just an extra step of covering your tracks and trying to get away with something that you knew you weren't supposed to.
I think I would give an example of that. I think just from my own life where I've had, and I'm not proud of this, obviously I have to take accountability for it, but there was a family member. I don't want to say who it is or anything like that, because I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feeling, but this woman was from my past. I have cut off all ties and so on and so forth. And I really dislike this person immensely. I would never target her at the malicious level. I'm not the kind of ethical person that's going to go out and say, I'm going to send juju at you and I want to drain your energy and I hope that you die. And, you know, because to me, that's taking it too far. That's taking it to the malicious level. But to say that I have made peace with this person, to say that I am still not angry and bitter towards that person, no, I still am.
Yeah,
so
I don't think
that kind of moves into that intention. I'm angry at that person to the point of just despising them.
Yeah, that's not, I don't know that that doesn't really fall under intentional for me. So even if you're shooting daggers at someone, even like, and I'm saying like mentally, like, you're angry with someone and you're like, man, I think it's when you start, I guess I would say like wishing bad upon them, because technically that's an intention that you're setting out.
It is. And I think that you're right. And I'm agreeing, because I'm like, I want to be sure I'm connected with spirit too, that I'm conveying the and they did say to me, yes, the intention is a part of it. But the difference is the intention hasn't moved into that. I know what I'm doing and I'm going to get your sorry little butt. You know what I mean?
So malicious is not only malicious is like, not only do I, you know, wish death upon you, but I'm going to light some candles and
I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to make it happen. Right. Because they talk about that's meant to cause harm or take from our person, meaning I'm going to take your thoughts, your emotions, your health, your energy. I'm going to take your money. I'm going to literally try to create some type of an effect at a psychic level that robs you of something, but isn't just about the intentional shooting of daggers. So,
because I don't know if I told you this, but I think I did tell you this, but I had an experience where it was like back in the day, as a teenager, I was, you know, mad at this girl, and you know, she was kind of a bully to me. And I was like, one day I was like, man, I wish she would die. And then I was like, instantly, like, I'm gonna take that back. I'm gonna say, no, I wish she would just really get fucked up or hurt or something like that, right? The next day she showed up after having been in a car accident, and of course she didn't die, but she did have like some kind of bandage across her head, and you know, she got hurt. And I will not say that I directly caused that, but it did cause me to think about it, like
take a step back. Yeah,
wow, did I really just wish bad upon this person and then it actually happened? And good thing I took back my original wish, because I would have felt really bad.
That's a strong intention. And that's the whole point. I mean, if we look at healing, it's a strong intention that has a positive effect. So why would a negative intention not have a negative effect?
Right.
You're right. It was.
So
who knows?
While I would say that that's an intentional wish, it's an intentional wish upon someone to be hurt. It is not to the extent of the malicious factor where it's like, and then I went and tried to do some juju to make that happen.
I think that that's a great example. I think that's a perfect example of it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So that points to the fact that you said we need to be aware of what our emotions and our intentions and our energy is. I mean, if we choose to be someone who wants to be ethical and respectful, does that mean that I'm going to instantly resolve that dislike that I have for this person? That is still a part of my childhood and my past. I still struggle with that. But I do try to make sure that I keep it in check so that I'm not projecting it out into the world. I am trying to say, look, this is my issue. It needs to stay with me. I'm trying to back it down into kind of that causal level where I am only accountable for that energetic feeling, because it's not ethical for me to intentionally shoot those daggers at her, because then I could be affecting her. And in many ways, I don't want that karma. I got enough to deal with as it is.
Right. Well, that's also true. So, I mean, I guess it can be accidental in the way that maybe you're thinking about someone and I don't know. Maybe you're thinking negatively about someone and then they pick up your negative thoughts. And so that in turn makes them feel some kind of way. as far as negative. I don't know.
No,
But I
I
think
think
that can happen
that's
too.
yes, I agree with you. And I think that's the point is that, when we hear in spiritual or woo-woo communities, we talk about the unity and the oneness. This is the point of energy and psychic information, whatever word you want to call it, the oneness, the great cosmic consciousness. We are all connected. This is the point of, I think, the intrusions lesson is that we need to realize that intrusions are happening all the time because we are connected, because we are in a state of oneness, because we are commingling our energies, both as a projector and an absorber. We're all doing those particular things. And so we want to be careful to say, oh, I've been psychically attacked because you walked down down the Walmart aisle and the lady that's next to you is sick and suddenly you get sick and you've leapt to an inclusion to the conclusion that it's an attack. It's not. It's an accidental intrusion. And in many ways, I think that these steps were designed to be empowering because I think that spirit wants to empower us. And so if we think about that information in terms of, oh, that was just an accidental interaction, we can kind of look at that from a place of light and love and compassion and then move on, as opposed to a place of fear. What's that? Why do I need to be afraid of that? You know what I mean?
Sure.
I think these are designed to be insightful. And also kind of, because I'm trying to stay connected and being sure that kind of spirit is guiding me with what I need to say, but giving people these categories so they can look at experiences and say, where do they fall? Right? Where am I finding myself most vulnerable? Because if you're finding yourself very vulnerable when you're out in a grocery store or in your public environments, then what kinds of things do you need to do? What protection strategies do you need to do if accidental is your most vulnerable place? Right?
Right. Which I would just say, mirroring or shielding,
Right. Exactly. Identifying it and letting it move on. I mean, because awareness and discernment are huge. And so each one of these categories kind of requires different levels of protection. Granted, they're all the same, but let's face it, you're going to need a lot stricter level of intervention for a malicious intrusion as opposed to the accidental ones, right?
Absolutely. Because it's the malicious side of it is that they're adding so much more to the pot. So you have to combat that energy with something positive.
So that's why kind of identifying where we're at and that's what I thought when we were discussing it privately, I thought this is really fascinating, even in terms of assisting other people that may be coming to you for help, is like, where in these categories are they struggling? Now, I think you tend to get with people that are kind of in that 4 and 5, that intentional and malicious category, because that's really kind of where your specialty is. Whereas for me, sometimes dealing with people who are psychic or sensitive, they're more in that causal, accidental type of situation, but that doesn't mean that they can't run into other experiences, right? Whether that's from spirit or not. And especially too, for people who are doing healing or psychic work, and they say how they can't separate themselves from their sitter when they're done with their session, right? So that's a psychic protection mechanism that people may need to have as well. If you're so connected and you've commingled so much with the energy of your sitter that when the two of you part, you can't leave that energy behind, you're going to need some protection strategies to deal with that.
Right, absolutely.
Because then you're lingering in an energy that's going to suddenly start shifting your energy, and you can have very adverse effects from that.
Yeah. Definitely.
And I've even heard healers say, I take on the energy of other people, and so it affects me. Some people say that can be the dangers of this work, but I think there's some protocols that people can develop to prevent that from happening. Which again is not really the topic of the discussion today. So,
well, but it is a little bit, because it's still psychic intrusion if you're healing or you're not. So
right, it is, and I think that's why it's important to distinguish intrusion versus attack, because that's not an attack, but you're still being intruded and you still may need psychic protection. So that's why I really loved this lesson from Spirit. Taking a look at the 5 levels of intrusion and identifying those. So I encourage people to go back and take a look at those. If you're really strongly interested, I'd be happy to write them up and share them for folks. But I think that evaluating those and finding out where you feel you may be having the most difficulty.
Well, maybe deciding or figuring out what you are as far as a projector or an absorber is a good start.
But I think we're both. And so I think...
Well, I think we are, but I think we also have a tendency to do one or the other.
And I think there are certain emotional states, if I can, and see what you think about this, because I know the projector and absorber is kind of something that you had devised, and I think it's brilliant. But I'm projecting probably more when I'm angry and in these aggressive states. And I am probably absorbing far more in fear and anxiety and worry states, because that's when we're allowing, there's this vulnerable space inside of us, right? Our aura has become weakened, our energies become weakened. So or a place of self-love, self-doubt, these are weakened states.
Right. Like if you go into a store and you're feeling like $1 million, and even if somebody says something to you, you're going to be like, oh, I'm sorry, pal. Too bad you're having a bad day. You know, chances are it's just going to bounce right off.
Exactly. That's so important.
If you go in there and you're already down and you're already angry or feeling whatever kind of way,
you're going to absorb more because you're in that absorption.
Yes.
Your energy is in that absorption. It's already weakened by fear, anxiety, worry, self-doubt, trauma. And so I think you're bringing up a really good point, because I wanted to move to, there's 2 different steps to psychic protection. One of them is prevention. The other one is eradication, right? So we think the same thing in terms of health. If you're already sick, you're past the point of prevention, right? So let's talk about prevention first. And we just talked about it. And the first thing that I wanted to talk about for prevention is having a strong sense of self, being aware of how you're feeling, energy, your emotional management, your mental management. But you're right. If you're feeling strong and happy and you love yourself and you're feeling good, you're projecting a sense of confidence.
Yes.
But that stuff isn't going to come into you.
Not as easily, I would say.
I think it's going to take somebody with a lot stronger intention. Now, you might have a wave of somebody that's really, let's say somebody's really sick, or maybe is really having a tough time, and maybe you're sensitive. You may sense it, but you may have the stronger ability to resist it. Right? If you have a healthy body and you get a cold, your body's going to fight that very, very quickly. The same thing, if you have a strong sense of self, a strong identity, a strong emotional, mental state of mind, you may be aware of it, but you're able to not absorb it because it's not your natural state of being.
Right. And you would recognize it when it comes into your space. And you'll be like, ew, that's not mine.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So when you were talking about projectors, I think what I was talking about is those aggressive states that we get in, whether I'm angry or I'm pissed off or I feel like somebody has done me wrong. Those are very strong projecting types of emotions.
You can project happy, like the people that
no, because it's an
super
intensity.
Annoyingly happy in the morning.
Yeah,
and
but
you're
that's
like, wow.
You're right. It's an intensity. And we could probably even project a strong sense of sadness, right? We could be projecting that. But I think when I'm in terms of absorbing, I don't know, are we capable of absorbing in those really intense states? Or are we so busy projecting that the absorption is a little less because we're all...
I don't know. I would say if you're in projection mode and it doesn't, I would say it doesn't matter what the emotion is, but when you're in projection mode, you're in that mode. And it would take a lot more for someone to take you down a notch or to sway it They would have to be equally projecting a different kind of emotion your way. So let's say I come in and I'm happy hunky dory and I la 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 la, and somebody is like, oh yeah, well blah 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 blah, and then it busts my bubble and takes me down a notch, and I'm like,
yep.
oh,
very true. Okay. It can absolutely.
You know,
that's a really good point.
I guess I'm not that happy.
Well, and here's another weakened state though that this just came to me, whether it was inspired or I just logically thought about it, is let's talk about the state of victimhood. That is a very weakened state, right? Where Absolutely. We would think that somebody that feels a victim is always absorbing all of this other stuff. But in many ways, people really also project victim. It's like you ever get in a session with someone or you're working with someone and you're like, wow, that person is just so projecting. They're in victim mode. That's the mode. Yeah.
It's really frustrating.
Well, aside from how it feels and its frustration, though, I mean, in many ways, they are projecting that. But what are they absorbing? More victim mode. That's the whole point of like energy attracts like energy.
Right.
So again, we're talking about prevention, right? So if we're looking at these intrusions and we say, what are the preventative measures? Let's deal with prevention first, right? So having a strong sense of self.
That's really it.
I mean, that's why we say that the psychic and the spiritual journey is really a journey of self-discovery. You want to be able to handle whatever your mental and emotional challenges are. When I became fearful or angry, I'm really evaluating those because I know those weaken me.
Right.
Right. I know those weaken me. I know that those put out into the atmosphere negative vibrations that are going to repel other people and or draw more of the same to me. So I'm working on how do I manage those types of things. Mm-hmm. So that requires us to have some responsibility in regards to whether or not we're going to be impacted by negative intrusions. We have to take care of that ourselves.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Because I mean, somebody could try to bust my bubble and instead of taking me down a notch, I could try to lift them up a bit, right?
Yes.
Where you kind of make that distinction between, well, you know what? I was just happy hunky-dory, so guess what? Right. You're going to be happy hunky-dory too.
That's right.
Instead of letting it bother you. So
very true. Very true.
Yeah, I think you're right about, the self-awareness is key. And then I think just recognizing that, hey, this was my state when I started. And if you do start to get this intrusion, to recognize, why or where it's coming from.
Absolutely. That's one of the preventative steps is the discernment, is kind of paying attention to your own emotional state, being self-aware, and then going, wow, I just had a really bad moment. It's okay to ask yourself, where did that emotion come from? Be aware of it, honor it. Is it mine? If it's mine, then valid, then take a look at it. But saying, I don't know, maybe there was just a wave in the atmosphere, because I'm in a relationship with my spouse and he and I are very connected. What if he just had an angry moment at work? And I'm just kind of getting that would be causal, right? It's not intentional. Right. I'm in a relationship with someone. It may be, maybe your child is having a tough day today at school. You may not necessarily say you're psychic, but we're all connected, especially with people that we're in relationship with. So in that particular case, don't own the anger. If you can't identify why just go, that's interesting. I felt a little down there.
I think as the empath, I'll just say for those of people that are, it is a lot harder for them to just be like, I don't know, because for me, I'll speak for myself.
It is. No.
It's harder for me to not just throw it right back. And I have to be careful of that, where it's like I absorb the information or the emotion and then I just project it right back. It's like a vicious cycle.
Well, see, now for me, I wouldn't say that I don't throw it back. I simply become aware of it and then let it go. I'm not throwing it because if it's
person than I.
Let's say it's your spouse or your child, right? Yeah. Let's say it's a loved one or a dear friend, because sometimes I'm thinking about you and I get hit with something that's going on with you, and it just rolls into me and I'm like, wow, I really need to get a hold of Sarah, or maybe I need to get a hold of my friend Ann or something. So I don't want to throw that back, but I will say, I notice it. I need to pay attention to it, but it's not mine. So I
Right.
don't need to wear it.
Right.
So I'm not
that's what I'm
tossing it
saying
back.
about the whole reaction.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's easy to fall into. So it's like if you're an empath and you're reacting to it, it's easy to just do that. I had to work a lot to stop myself in that moment and be like, oh, that's not my emotion. I don't need to feel that way. And navigate that scenario where I guess the easier aspect is to just fall into it and then throw it right back at them. Oh, well, you're having a bad day. Well, screw you. Cause you know, I'm having a bad day now too. Cause you just ruined my day. You know? So
I don't know if that would be the loving thing to do, but I guess it depends on the person whether or not you want to throw it back at them or not. But
right.
You know, I don't consider myself an empath, and so as you're talking, it does give me a little more compassion for the people that are being bombarded or absorbed more. So I think we were talking about prevention, and I think we kind of covered those. You know, strong sense of self, energy management, awareness of each of the intrusion potentials, identifying what is you versus what's the other person, which requires some discernment, and then emotional and mental management. But as an empath, then that moves into kind of that eradication mode, right? It's like, okay, so it's here. I've identified it. It's now become, it is what it is, but I'm unable to get rid of it. So if I can't prevent it, and it's happened, because it's happened to me too, right? Not too often, but it happens because I'm pretty good about clearing that stuff out, but it does happen. So now that moves us into, if I haven't prevented it and it has happened, then what is the eradication? That's where that protection level comes in. How do we eradicate that? And so I think this will be where you have a lot to contribute to. I know one of the things that I put down again, of course, is you have to be capable of discerning whether or not it's yours. You can't eradicate it if you still haven't discerned it, right?
True, but in your example, it was like, you know, you may or may not be able to validate it kind of thing, or find out where exactly it's coming from. I would suggest, if you find yourself in a situation like that, just to focus on your own vibration again and reground yourself and try to start fresh, so that you're kind of wiping the slate clean, I guess.
Right. And I think that's where the traditional psychic protection strategies come in. That's what I had put down. You know, that's when we need to start doing the self-help strategies, right? We need to start doing the visualizations where we're starting to protect our energy, right? We need to really focus on what's the emotion that's allowing this to take place. What is it that I need to change? We have to do some self-work, right?
Right. And so like, for example, in the causal ones that you're talking about in relationships, you know, whether we know it or not, we have, you know, energetic cords that go to all of our relationships.
Oh, great
so
point.
To speak.
So
it goes both ways, and you're constantly either projecting or absorbing these things. So if you notice that you are absorbing a particular emotion from someone that you don't want anymore, you just cut that cord. Like in your mind.
So that becomes a self-help strategy, right? That's
exactly.
An actual protective strategy that you can do. But if it's a cord with someone that you love.
And tons, it doesn't, it's okay. No, even if you're cutting the cord, it doesn't mean, oh, I'm cutting you out of my life forever. It just means I'm not absorbing this anymore. And if and when you reestablish that connection, it's like a fresh start. Does that make sense?
I see.
It's like a new connection. So you know, you can be best friends with someone for years and get into a fight with someone and be like, just cut the cord, because you don't want to feed the negative emotions just as much as you don't want to be absorbing them from the other person. And there are like 1.5 million different videos on meditating and cord cutting and how to do it, you know, visually in your mind, asking your guides and angels for help in that situation.
See, these are all self-help strategies, right?
Right. And these actually do make a difference. I didn't really understand it too much. Until I started astral, and sometimes you can see the cords even. And energy vampires, they often have many cords that they are feeding off of many different people at one time. So just something to think about, that there are people like that, that want to suck off your energy, or when we're talking about the malicious stuff, for example, it's not just your energy, it's your psychic energy, it's your or life force, so to speak.
It can be your physical health, or it depends on what they want to target you for at that malicious level. Right. And even if you're not aware of it, though, too, I think the point is that's why having these self-help, having some, again, I hate to use the word ritual, but having some practices that you do, whether that's getting in the shower once a week and envisioning, cleaning your energy out. And the other thing Spirit keeps hitting with me is to make sure that I say this, is that when we're recognizing that there may potentially be an intrusion, the highest thing that they're telling me we can do is to send back love and compassion and love, which is difficult to do if we're not in the right frame of mind. But they're kind of saying to me, especially when you were giving me that cord scenario, they were saying, if you shoot love back through the cord, there's nothing that's going to get past it. The problem is we tend to have a problem doing that because of our own emotional reactions to things. So we can get ourselves in a state of mind. And again, I'm feeling like Spirit's kind of inspiring this a little bit here, is if we can get ourselves in the frame of mind where we're shooting that love and compassion back through that cord, not only are we protecting ourselves, but we're giving them a gift, which will help stabilize them and help benefit them. And if we're having a cord in those causal relationships that we want to maintain, that's the best gift we can give to everyone involved.
Absolutely. Especially if it's, like your best friend and you get into a fight, it's, you could just definitely send the love or whatever.
Absolutely.
For people that you want to set, for people that maybe you want to set better boundaries with, do the cord cutting. But like I said, you can do the cord cutting and still reestablish a connection. It's not forever. It's just, I don't want to feel that right now, so go away. Another thing is, for me, it's extremely difficult to send people love that have directly tried to hurt me. And
I think that can be a challenge for all of us. It's right. Yeah. It's like, it's difficult not to react with anger, but there are some people that have mastered that.
Jesus. Okay. So,
I don't know. I know there's some pretty amazing people out there that do it, but
I know I'm not me. I have a hard time sending love and light all the time. So
I'm working on it. I'm
just being honest, because
we're human. It's
easy to say, oh, go ahead and send love and light, but it's a whole nother situation to do it, especially when you're smack dab in the middle of a psychic attack. And you don't want to send love and light. You don't. You have a hard time.
Well, I think it still has to be addressed.
The point is that the love part of it, like, you're not going to get past it without eventually sending love and light, because otherwise you're just going to keep perpetuating the situation by feeding it more negativity.
It is an important component. It is.
And so a mantra that I like to use is, any negative energy that is not mine, I acknowledge, transmute, and send back to source. Yes, so the transmutation part is the most important part of that mantra, because you are transmuting the negative to the positive.
No, I love that one. And I use it as well sometimes. Yeah. Because like you said, you're not necessarily always wanting to throw it back. You want to be careful about that. So, but these are what we're talking about, eradication steps. When we talk about psychic protection, it happens at a lot of different levels. And the question becomes, what do you find yourself being intruded by the most? Are you doing preventative measures, which is a form of protection? Right. And you will hear mediums that say, I don't worry about it because I only connect with the highest of spirits. And 99.9% out of the time, that's going to work for them because that's where they're resonating. But that doesn't mean that accidents and things can't happen. But to be worried about that all the time is the antithesis of what you should be doing.
Right.
do your preventative measures. And then if you have to move into eradication because something has happened, then okay, then we can deal with that then. But prevention is everything in health, in energy management, in mental, emotional, and in psychic work. So pay attention to the preventative measures. So I think we talked a lot about the self-help strategies, whether that's energetically, spiritually, but also mental and emotional. If you know you're in an unbalanced state of mind, then you need to be careful about the situations that you're putting yourself in, where you're going, what you're doing, and you need to be working on whatever it is that those issues are. That is an eradication process. You're going to need to find a tool, something to help you move out of that state, or you're going to start commingling with like energy and you're going to become more and more vulnerable to that.
Right. Again, goes back to meditation and shadow work and dealing with these traumas from your past that keeps you at a negative vibration.
And I think there's lots of ways you can do it, though. I mean, it's, somebody like, well, maybe I don't like meditation. Okay, great. Then do art and get your emotions out that way. Find something that works for you, whatever that strategy
art can
is.
be meditation. When I say meditation, it's like, it's a loose.
It is, and that's why I brought it up. And you're right. Art is a form of meditation, but I didn't want people to think of the classical meditation when you said it, I guess.
Either way,
I appreciate you clarifying that. Yeah.
I don't care how you do it.
The point is the strategy. The point is the strategy that gets you into that space. The other point is
introspection. So just because you're going for a jog and you think you're meditating doesn't mean you're introspecting. Introspection is part of the dark. It's part of the shadow work, the looking at your dark side, acknowledging these things, and forgiving yourself for your own shortcomings. This is at least what I've learned. So there's a combination of awareness, and then purging, and then how do I not do that anymore? Perfect. You're saying it perfectly, because I was going to throw out there, I loved journaling for doing kind of my inner work. If I'm having a really negative emotion, I'm going to go to a piece of paper and I'm going to journal it, and I'm going to rant and I'm going to rave and I'm going to talk, because I want to get the emotion out. Stuffing emotion does not help you. You must deal with the emotion. So get it out. If you go punch a bag, we've talked about this in other videos. If you want to punch a bag, ride a bike, do whatever, but that's not enough. You've got the emotion out. But if you're not going to replace it with something, which I think is what you were referring about, you're not going to look at, why am I recreating that? Where's my responsibility? How do I replace that with something more loving, more positive, more beneficial? How do I go back to my past that's making this a problem now? That's that introspection that you're talking about. We have to find those strategies. I want to say, why did I get triggered? Like, what was the trigger factor?
Right.
Why is that a big deal? Do I really need to freak out about that or not?
Right.
If the answer is yes, then okay, I'm totally justified in my feelings here. Maybe I just projected it in a way that wasn't that great. Right. So how can I now change from my emotional response to my emotional reaction differently, I guess? Like, I have an emotional response in me, but when I react to somebody else with it, like, how does that, because that is kind of a projection. I think that, in some ways we don't understand that we're doing.
It triggers you. It triggers something. Something.
Yeah. So what are my triggers? Why is that a thing for me? How can I move past them, or I don't know. It's just like a slow and steady progress, because I don't expect anyone to be like, oh, well, I'm just totally fine with it now, whatever it could be. If it's like against your morals or something like that, it's like, you have to understand and acknowledge why you had that emotion, but then let it go. Move on.
We talked about transmuting. We have to transmute our own energy as well, because that's the whole point of it. We have to be, the stronger our personal energy is. And that was a word I heard while you were talking too. It's about personal power. So I want people thinking about psychic protection. I don't mean but we, it's like people think of psychic protection. I'm going to do this little ritual and I'm going to light a candle and I'm going to use a stone and I'm going to say a prayer. I think that those things matter. I'm not undermining them, but I think we need to look at psychic protection as this big picture. Where's the intrusion coming from? How am I responsible for both absorbing and projecting? What is coming into my life? How do I need to transmute that so that I have that sense of personal power, mentally, emotionally, physically as well? People who
right, because how are you you're not gonna be able to
mm-hmm.
do the little rituals and everything if you don't recognize that you're being psychically attacked to begin with. So discernment is
that's the awareness and the discernment, and it, I know it sounds overwhelming to people, and I'm not trying to put it that way. I'm just wanting people to think about protection is really about self-empowerment. It's about
absolutely.
dealing with whatever it is that you've got going on in that moment, and being in a state of fear about certain intrusions is not helpful. So I want to move to the last step in eradication and talk about that a little bit before we close out the show, because the last part of eradication, right? Let's say prevention didn't work, we're aware of something, or we're not aware of something, and we just know that something's going on, and we reached out to other people for assistance. And I've had to do this, and you've had to do this, and people come to you for this. And at that point, that's where we need outside assistance. And that's true for all of us. Maybe I'm having so much emotional stuff that I need to go see a therapist. Maybe I'm having a lot of physical challenges and I need to see a doctor. Perhaps we are energetically having some issues and we need to see a healer, or we need someone who can help us clear, which is what you do, or help move some of these intrusions out of our system. I don't think there's anything wrong with asking for assistance. But I think the one thing that you've really kind of instilled in me, by listening to some of your cases and stories, is how much people recreate the same problem by not taking these other steps that we've already discussed.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like going to the doctor, getting the pill, but you're still eating the bonbons and the sodas and the Dunkin' Donuts, and then you don't understand why you're still getting sick.
Right.
So the psychic protection, it's okay to ask for help and get help. But if you're not doing some of these other things, regardless of what modalities you pick.
Right. Also, I want to say, stop giving your power away.
In what way? What do you mean by that? I mean, I agree with you, but put it in context with protection.
People give their power away, especially when it comes to other people's malicious intrusions.
How so?
Because they're scared and they're like, oh, this person is, the Wicked Witch of the West, and they know all of this stuff. And how could I ever combat that?
That's tough though, because it is difficult not to be afraid when we feel like we're in a malicious attack type of scenario. Fear is a natural product.
I agree. So I'm saying, like, I'm not saying I haven't been scared. I'm saying don't be scared.
Right. Try to find a way not to. I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Right.
Totally
don't give your power away to somebody by saying, well, they're psychically intruding me and I can't do anything about it because it just keeps happening. Well, then change up what you're doing.
That statement right there in and of itself is completely part of the problem.
Right.
They're doing this to me and I can't do anything about it.
Exactly.
Listen to that. That's very disempowering.
Yeah.
I think that was a big difference when you helped me, because I've had 2 malicious intrusions. One was from spirit and one was from a living person. And when I had the intrusion from spirit happened first, then the intrusion from the living person happened second. And I recognized it immediately because it had happened in the past. Whether or not it was intentional or malicious, I know you and I are still on the fence. I really don't care either way. For me, it was just about the eradication process.
Right.
But I think you bring up a good point. I didn't get scared. I got a little angry.
Right.
I got a little upset, but I moved into solution mode, not fear mode.
Exactly.
So I think that's what you're talking about, right?
Right. Exactly. So
you can acknowledge it.
You can acknowledge it. Just don't be.
But being scared of it or being a victim to it is not the mindset to have. And I know it's easy to tell people not to go there, but if you're going there, ask yourself why.
Right.
I immediately told myself, I'm not going to become a victim and I'm not going to be afraid of this. There is a solution. I'm going to find it. I'm going to be a part of the solution. We're going to get it resolved. That's it. That was an empowering step right there in and of itself. If I had sunk to the other level, I would have been down here, and there's no way I could have resolved it as quickly as we resolved it by being down here. So I hope that people understand that. And I think you bring up a good point.
Yeah. Yeah.
In that mindset.
And yeah, I mean, and once it gets to that point where it's full on malicious and you might have to light some candles and
you may have to go the extra mile. That's
right.
Exactly right. And I equate this to a physical issue again. So you're drinking all the coffee and the soda and the bonbons and the Dunkin' Donuts and the fast food, and you're not feeding yourself properly. You've dug yourself a hole.
Right.
You're going to have to work to get out of it. Now, I'm not saying that you dug a hole on a malicious attack, as sometimes just happens, right? People sometimes
especially in your case, that was not expected. But it was still malicious. It was still intentional, even though it was, she you didn't see it coming, but she did.
Right. But it happened. And so it's like, we can't sit there and go, oh, woe is me. Because maybe we did. You're right. Maybe we didn't create it. But then again, maybe we weren't doing all the right things, and we are going to have to dig ourselves out of the hole. I think it depends on what caused the scenario.
Definitely. That is a key factor.
We have
definitely
to look
take
at
that into consideration.
Right.
Most people, I think, probably know exactly who it is if they're being maliciously attacked. Probably. Okay. And I say probably because your case was kind of that wishy-washy, it was that weird area where it wasn't expected. It wasn't like you had a beef with somebody that's now coming after you. It was just, they were preying upon your psychic
but if
energy.
I had not had the discernment, and I think this story is important for people, because I don't want people to say, well, I'm not psychic, so I don't necessarily, because we do know that people that are not sensitive may not know, and that's okay too. Because had I not opened up psychically and been all of a sudden aware of her presence psychically, I may not have put two and two together. So sometimes it is possible that someone is maliciously affecting our energy, and we may not have the discernment to know that that's taking place. So I do think that that's why it's okay to ask for help. I think you're saying that we may have an idea of who it is, but truthfully, this person was a stranger to me. I had only had a conversation with her on a phone for maybe 20 minutes about a business related matter. So she would not have been someone that would have been in my wheelhouse of suspects.
Right. That's kind of what I'm saying. Yeah. Sometimes I think
so we may not know where it's coming from.
Sometimes I think you do. Sometimes so that's why the scenario is for everyone is going to be different.
Right.
You might not know. And does it matter? Not really. It doesn't necessarily matter. Even if you're, trying to break something that's malicious.
I think certainly a diagnosis can help, though. It's kind of like if you have a disease, if you know what the diagnosis is, at least you know what you need to combat. So I think it can help to identify it. But I certainly don't want people to think, oh, gee, I don't know where it's coming from, or leap to the conclusion that their physical stuff is related to spirit or energetic issues, when it could literally be. I
want to bring that up for sure. So I don't know that I can speak for everyone when I say this, but typically for me, when I'm experiencing a physical ailment that has nothing to do with my physical self, it comes in these strange waves where it will be there and then it'll be gone. And then it'll be there and then it'll be gone. And it'll be there and then it'll be gone. So it comes in these weird waves like that, like just do. And if I stop and I say, is this from spirit? Is this something spiritual, or is this something actually physical?
Right.
If it goes away, that's my sign that says this is spiritual.
I think the only reason I would disagree with that to some extent is that people can have waves of nausea that are related to something that's going on physically, right? I mean, for example, let's just say you have a flu. You're not nauseous all the time, but it'll be pretty persistent. You'll have some other symptoms that will go with that. Does that make sense? Like, you know, your
but
body
I
aches or
think
headache or
no, to me, it's a difference between going from like headache to no headache. Does that make sense?
yeah.
So,
But nausea is a tough one because nausea comes in waves.
well, I will say that, okay, sure, nausea comes in waves, but if I start to get nauseous and I start to ground myself and really start to pull in my energy and focus, if that starts to dissipate almost immediately,
can you heal yourself out of it, so to speak?
right?
Yeah.
It's like, is this something energetic? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it is some, you know, shady gas station food that I ate earlier today.
Right.
But maybe it's just something that I'm picking up on. Your gut instinct is there for a reason. It picks up on stuff.
Right.
So there are many times where I've had psychic, I guess, intrusions, intentional ones, where my gut was the first to know.
Fair enough. Right. Fair enough.
But it doesn't mean that I could have taken it as I was sick a lot at that point. Or I have just nerves. I'm nervous all the time. And my stomach just, you know, people chalk it up to all kinds of stuff. But remember, our vibration energetically can manifest things physically. We talked about that.
No. I mean, the one you helped me with, I'm totally on board with that. Cause I had even said to you prior to me being aware that that person was doing that, the day was either the day before or 2 days before. I mean, I was like, I'm sick, but it was sick in a way that I'd never been sick before. So I even said to myself, I've got an upset stomach. I had nausea, but I went, this is weird. I've never felt like this before. It was nausea, but it wasn't the normal, because I sometimes, if I'm in a chronic fatigue flare, sometimes I will get nausea. I know what that feels like.
Right.
And that's a part of why we need to know ourselves. We need to be aware of our own bodies, our own energy, our own emotions. That's part of that discernment. Because even if I knew that.
Right. Even if I get food poisoning or something, it's like, I know it doesn't stop. Like your stomach will hurt and you're like, oh my God. And then when I finally throw up, then I feel better. Right.
Right.
And that's a direct cause of something that I ate. However,
my illness was it was weird. It was weird.
Yeah.
Different.
I think
kind of had a little bit of a headache, but it was just a weird thing. And you were right about the waves.
Right. It definitely comes in waves. So there have been plenty of times where I've been kind of felt like I've been bombarded, and then I grounded and I said, you know, I just like throw out your aura, ground yourself. And all of a sudden it would start to go away. And I'm like, well, that's weird. So if I can ground out of something, out of a pain or an ailment, is that self-healing? Sure. But is that, you know,
either way it works. That's what's really
either way
important.
It works, right? So it doesn't matter the
situation, regardless.
Right. It doesn't matter that, oh, that could be someone sending me bad thoughts. The fact is that I fixed it by grounding out of it.
But I do know too, and I think that you bring up a good point. And I think because you and I are kind of I'm shadowing what you're doing with the person that I had referred to you. And I know that that's what we're talking about today. But I think the other thing that's really important is that sometimes people will look at their physical issues and they believe they're going to heal it all from a mental, emotional, or spiritual or energetic level. And I think that that's a naive perspective as well. Yes, I understand that all of these things commingle. And I've been learning that more and more as spirit comes through, and kind of I'm working with different sitters and they give me lessons and I'm kind of having to absorb that. But at the same time, it works the opposite direction. If you're not taking care of yourself physically and you're making bad physical choices, that also impacts your emotional, mental, energetic, and spiritual self. So you can't look at it as, oh, well, my body's only sick because of these energetic, spiritual issues. No, you could physically be contaminating yourself to the point that all of these other things are now deteriorating. So we have to look at ourselves as a holistic picture. And I don't want to get too far off track of psychic protection, but I think the point of this is recognizing we owe it to ourselves to be empowered, to be healthy, to be aware. Nobody's perfect. We're all struggling, but this is a form of
you brought up a good point as far as, because psychic attacks or, I guess stuff like that, it can have a physical aspect on people. So it's important, I think, to know what is your normal physicalness. And if you're not taking care of yourself, you're not going to recognize it because you are always in pain. Absolutely. Or something like that.
And that truly saddens me when people are not in a healthy state. If they're having a sugar craving, they don't really know if they're hungry or not. They literally have no idea if their body is desperate for some type of nutrient. They've lost all sense of nutritional or intuitional eating, as I call it, because they're now in a addictive state to a chemical that is masking their true natural state.
Right.
It's the same thing as being in a state of grief or a state of trauma or a state of anger. You're not in a balanced, empowered type of way. So I guess we've kind of talked about a lot of different things, but I wanted to get people really thinking about psychic protection is a really holistic approach, and that it involves a variety of different things, and that we need to look at intrusions coming from a variety of different ways. And we're not just protecting ourselves from these malicious intrusions, but from all of these other intrusions, some of them which are just normal and innocent.
Right.
It's just going to happen.
Yeah, I'm going to throw out the last one for me, which is take a salt bath, because there's so many actual physical health benefits from using, like Epsom salts or whatever, bath salts, sea salts, natural salts that haven't been.
I do an Epsom bath at least twice a week. At least twice a week.
Good for you. Twice a week. It does remove certain energetic bodies and certain things in your body that just promote overall health. And
you're absorbing the magnesium, and your body will only absorb magnesium to the level that it needs it. If you're taking it in supplemental form, it's very difficult. It's not as bioavailable. You're forcing your body to take it. It may not get into your cells. When you're taking an Epsom salt bath, that magnesium, which we all very, very much need for a variety of reasons, your body will self-regulate. So it eases soreness. Like you said, it detoxifies. I'm only in it for maybe 10 minutes, but I'm still doing it twice a week. So
good for you. Good for you. That's super excellent. I love it.
Always.
But yeah, it's one of the things that even if, even if I have to go to clear someone, a lot of times these attachments they'll be kind of, they're hard to pull out or hard to push out.
Especially if they've manifested physically, right?
Right. And so if I tell someone, hey, you should take a salt bath, and then I go to clear it, it's like 10 million times easier because it's already started to release.
I see.
So as a preventative measure, even because it's a salt, and look up salt. I did write a little bit about it in my blog about grounding, I believe, but there was a lot actually about salt and the sacredness of salt and why it helps energetically to keep a person clear. So I would just say, as a preventative, that's a good idea, but also to be aware of your energies. And
that's something I do in the salt bath. If I'm in there for 10 minutes, you can take that period of time to find some type of just visualization that you like. And again, people are like, well, which strategy should I use? I think you need to find the strategy that works for you, because I can tell you to do something, and if you're not going to do it, it's irrelevant. You need to find something that fits your lifestyle. Since I do a lot of bike riding, I like on the nights that I've done a bike ride, that's the other reason I do the Epsom salt bath. It helps take the soreness out of my muscles. It helps my muscles recover as well. But I've also turned that into a part of my life that I can now use that 10 minutes to insert some visualizations. So I can tell you to do 20 different things. And if it doesn't fit your lifestyle, it doesn't matter, which is why I'm trying to encourage people to find psychic protection protocols that work for you and your lifestyle. And if anybody wants any suggestions, they can always reach out and ask. I'm happy to point people in different directions, but there's so many different ways you can do it. It's about you finding the options that will work for you. And I think that becomes very individualistic. So I hope we're not avoiding the topic with people, but kind of getting them to think about it in a bigger picture.
Right. Like for me, it's the daily, chakra cleanse in the shower kind of thing.
Right.
Just do it.
Which you've tried. And see, that's the whole point. You've tried to get me to do that. I'm like, yeah, I don't want to do that. And you're like, no, you need to do it. I'm like, nah, I don't want to do that. But see, that's the point. That's why it's individualized. It's just one of those things that I can't stay focused on it long enough. And I recognize the need to do it because you've talked about it. And I know that for myself, but I'd prefer to find other ways to do it. So it's not about do it this way. It's about find the way that works for you, implementing some of these strategies and these things, these points that we've put out there today, as far as awareness and discernment and dealing with personal energy and power. And because again, if you're not a psychic person and you don't want to do any of this energy woo-woo stuff, there's still other ways that you can do that,
Yeah. And I think another one too is just trying to keep your own environment vibrationally high as well.
Absolutely. Happy, healthy, clean, organized. We all feel terrible when our home isn't organized, or those are gifts that you're giving to yourself.
Right.
It's going to make you stronger.
Self-care,
self-love. I heard the word earlier when we were talking. It's about personal power. Psychic protection is about your personal power. Right. And when you have that sense of personal power, you're just going to be a different human being all the way around. And so whatever it is that's disempowering you in this moment is probably the best place for you to start, and finding those strategies that will make people more empowered. I can't find a better note to end the show on than that one. So I feel complete unless you have any last words. I just want to say thanks for people for sticking with us this far. How about you?
Yes, thank you. No, I sure will cover it again in some other, I don't have anything really. The projector absorbers, that was my thing. That's it.
And then discussing the intrusions and helping people to kind of start evaluating those and seeing where you might find yourself the most vulnerable.
Yeah. And if anybody has questions about it, or, if they feel like,
as always, right,
they're dealing with something malicious and they need help, definitely reach out. But for the most part, I want to say is, remember to not give your power away.
That's part of the personal power. It's part of the personal power. You can't walk around in a state of fear. You just can't. And anything that's taking that from you today or tomorrow, that's a good place to start, being willing to take that journey. So thanks everybody for joining us. We have not discussed what our next show episode will be. We hope you've enjoyed this. As always, we're going to ask, please like, please share. And like she said, reach out if we need anything. So we'll see you next time, guys. Thanks. Bye.